And we're back with episode 15 of DoubleBuffs. This is Gregory Piantadosi. I am your co-host, and joined with me today on this fine Thursday evening is my co-host, Cristiano Tacalite. As always, how are we doing today, Cristiano?
I'm doing good. I want to wish all my DoubleBuffs homies out there, all my LCS homies out there, a lovely week going into this weekend. If you watch LCS or if you listen to DoubleBuffs, you're a homie of mine, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, and for everyone that's new that's tuning in, this is a NA LCS Esports Podcast where we give you all the best on what's happening in the league and our personal opinions and analysis of games, commentary, whatever it is. The game that stuck out to me in my mind recently, or at least I took a lot of notes on it, was Immortals versus Dignitas. I was thinking about kind of where Dignitas was at last split, where people were saying they were a dark horse coming into playoffs. They were playing 100 Thieves in the first round, and a lot of people predicted Dignitas to take that series over 100 Thieves. But what ended up happening is they got stomped 3-0, and I was thinking, well, last split they kind of got exposed for being, maybe not as good as they were. But in particular, Fake God doesn't look as good to me as he did last split. I see him getting solo killed a lot and not necessarily having the same gravity that he did last split in team fights. Like last split, he had some really good Gnar ultimates and stuff of that nature. But now this split, we see Impact solo killing him, having like an all-time game against him. We see Revenge solo killing him. And, beyond him, I think Neo hasn't impressed me as much as last season. I feel like Danny kind of took his spot as North America's new hyped ADC, but I think the conversation would get a little interesting when you think about both of their teams and maybe if you swapped Neo and Danny's teammates.
Yeah, it's pretty big fall from grace if you remember from season 1 of DoubleBuffs. We were sort of getting hyped up on Dignitas as the split went on, and I remember talking specifically about Neo and Fake God, saying these are two newer players in the case of Fake God to the league who have really started to impress me. And like you said, all of a sudden Fake God seems to like lose all these lanes. And yeah, just echoing what you said about his team fighting. And, maybe that's a result of management with stuff like the mysterious Saligo and Dardoch. Well, Dardoch less mysterious. I think we can imagine why he might have been removed. But some of these sort of funnier management decisions can sort of throw off the mojo of a team if all of a sudden your mid laner who you're gelling with is like removed. Yeah. So maybe that could have something to do with it.
Who's the other player? People were also like kind of speculating that Dardoch got kicked because of attitude issues, but part of it might have been behind benching Soligo in favor of Yusui. Like the team didn't look as cohesive and Dardoch wasn't looking as good as he did last split. And we know in the past, like one time he was on Team Liquid and they benched Phoenix for, I believe, Golden Glue. This is going back a few years ago. And Dardoch had some public comments that kind of like came out publicly where he was saying, I need my Koreans. They're the best. And then it happened again with them where his mid laners replaced. And then, but also like I kind of agree with Dardoch in this sense because Yusui has honestly been underwhelming to me. I think Soligo last split had like some really good performances, especially on Zoe. Yusui had a nice Yasuo game this weekend, which was pretty exciting to see. But all in all, I'm not too impressed with Dignitas, and I don't think they're going to really make any splashes this playoffs, expecting a first round exit.
Yeah, even that Yasuo game that they won, I mean, you could always say a big part of it are the people setting up Yasuo with the knockups and stuff that allow him to go in. And also, I was watching like little individual plays, and I was seeing some weird stuff with like not auto attacking people he's right next to, which I can relate to. It sounds kind of funny, but like when you're in that high pressure situation, it can be hard to always remember. Yeah, what do you say?
That's the Sven special. I always see him doing that in team fights.
Yeah. You're like so focused on something else, you just stop auto attacking. I saw a few of those with his Yasuo.
But on the other hand, they were playing Immortals, who I also want to touch up on. Insanity looked pretty good on LeBlanc, but overall hasn't really been the star player of this Immortals team. I really think it's been Reyes, their ADC. I think he's quietly been really, really good. And, people aren't really talking about him, but he has a good Ziggs, a good Callista. He even has the pocket pick Draven, which he also looks good on. And people aren't really talking about Immortals, but they have some nice players top to bottom. Like Xerxes, a pretty proven talent that's been all over the place. And I
Mm-hmm.
could see a world where they maybe upset a C9 or TL kind of in the early rounds of the playoffs, especially because of like the internal turmoil that Cloud9 and Team Liquid are going through. I think one of the um, catalysts or one of the reasons they, one of the consequences of having internal problems going into playoffs is that if you lose that game one, then trust might not necessarily be there. People start panicking a little bit more, like, this is time to like perform. Is our playoffs coming to an end? Is our world's coming to an end against such a bad team? That's where you can really get in your head. And I think like a team like Team Solo Mid might not necessarily have that same issue. But if Immortals takes game one off a team like that, then who knows?
Yeah, and they're having some strong showings. Like this weekend, they won against Evil Geniuses. They had a flawless 3-0 weekend, which is always really promising to see. And, this is the time you want to be ramping up. You're 1 week, 2 weeks behind or before playoffs. You want to really be hitting your peak form now. Get as good of a playoff position as you can get. And, yeah, become a real threat to every team in the league, which I think Immortals has shown they can be, especially, like I just said, taking down EG this weekend.
Is there like a team in particular that you're looking at come into playoffs, like maybe as someone that you think's gonna not perform up to expectations or kind of a dark horse? Is there anyone in particular?
I gotta say, I'm not so convinced by TSM. I know, Greg, you love your TSM, but I'm seeing some stuff, man, that just doesn't. I smell something bad going on. I got my nose, I got it up in the air, and some of these things I see Power of Evil doing on Syndra, like walking forward with
That
his
was a
brain
bad
turned
game.
off.
That was a bad game.
I mean, you could say it's a bad game, but if you have a bad game in playoffs, it's gonna count.
No, that
And
was a bad game. Bad game.
oh man, but yeah, Lost is looking, I feel like, more and more of a weak spot for this team as well. He's not really impressed me in any of like these matchups. I'm never like, whoa, Lost, that was crazy. You just CS gapped him so hard, or just went wild in the team fight, or anything like that. And yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I feel like with Lost, he sometimes like doesn't do anything too crazy in team fights. Like I was saying last week, Sven doesn't necessarily have very high, like he has kind of low highs. So maybe you can correlate that same point to Lost.
Yeah,
But I
there's
do
some
see in the lamening phase that it's our friend Alec in the background.
yeah.
Thank you,
Excuse
Alec.
me, it's very unprofessional.
But I do see
Stop, leave.
during the laning phase, he sometimes solo kills or duo kills with Sword Art. I think as a duo, they're pretty good in the solo lane. And I think that's all they need to do for this team. I think the real like kind of flip side of this roster would be Huni, who I think has looked much, much better recently. And last week I was talking about TSM as a whole. They don't really have that spice that like Golden Guardians has kind of been showing us recently. But I think it comes down to their ability to flex picks in the draft, especially between Spica and Huni. Like last split we saw, or maybe last year we saw Spica pull out the Shen in the jungle, for example, and this last week we saw him pull out Mundo in the jungle and Gwen in the jungle, and we see Nocturne in the top lane. So there's kind of like these flexing that they can do, and that's kind of like their spice that I see that they could bring into playoffs. And they got down in some early deficits this past weekend, and they managed to come back or at least keep the game really close. So I think TSM and Evil Geniuses are honestly the top two teams, the favorites coming into playoffs.
You mentioned seeing these Nocturne and these Mundo picks, and I see where you're coming from. But to me, especially the Huni continuing to pick Nocturne, it feels more like a crutch to me than anything else. It's like this really safe laner that he probably isn't going to get solo killed on. You have your fear, you're super fast with your Q and your spell shield. And he also manages sometimes to like take advantage of the more aggressive aspects of it, obviously.
Well, what about his like Jason Lee Sin games recently? He's looked pretty good on a few different picks, especially in team fights.
I can't. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But something in the back of my head just says, just doesn't believe in Huni. And it's so sad for me to say that.
I mean,
But
I kind of agree with you. It's kind of like what is? I'm trying to reflect on the split. It's like I don't even remember
yeah,
TSM games. They're kind of just like there.
they're really, really strange, I find, a lot of the time. And it just kind of feels like they're bumbling around the map to me, which I guess is they probably have some idea what they're doing. But I'm worried about TSM. And they're the ones who I think are going to take a dive in the playoffs. I
Well, I mean, I guess I see what you're saying, but TSM doesn't necessarily have the same like Power of Evil had a bad game this past week, but they don't necessarily have the same X factor of Jizuke or like on Evil Geniuses, right? Very coin flippy
mhm.
team. Impact has looked so dang good this split. Let me just
Yeah,
say
for
that.
sure.
But a player like Jizuke, Power of Evil might have one game where he ends, but Jizuke could have an entire series where he ends. And consistency in playoffs does matter. I think another point on Evil Geniuses is Ignar picked out the Tom Kench support again this past week. They lost.
Oh god, yeah.
No impact whatsoever. But yeah, how do you feel about Evil Geniuses?
Like you said, I wish people would stop picking Tom Kench. I was just thinking, so like the reason I think they probably went with Tom Kench is because the opponent team took away that thresh, which goes with Aphelios a lot because you can lantern it out of sticky situations. You have a bunch of tools to peel the box, hook, flay. Like basically every move you have can be used to peel for Aphelios, the dashless AD carry.
Yeah.
Um, and so you take that away, and I guess EG is probably thinking, okay, well, the next best thing at saving the AD carry is Tom Kench
Mm-hmm.
eat, right? But it's just not really the case anymore. I mean, if you pick even something like Janna, something like Morgana, I feel like even these picks are protecting your AD carry in a better way than Tom Kench is. I don't know what Tom Kench's niche is, and even honestly, he's being picked in solo lanes a lot right now. So I'm going off about Tom Kench, but I feel like even in solo lanes, I'm not that impressed by what he's doing. Like it feels like he's just sort of another body that piles in when a team is already winning, but I don't feel like he's that useful on his own. Um,
Well, definitely
but yeah,
comparing like Tom and Thresh. Like Thresh just kind of does everything Tom Kench does, just at a much better level, at least right now after the rework,
yeah,
because Thresh Lantern has so many more applications and it's such lower cooldown than a Tom Kench ultimate, because that's his save ability now. But I
hmm
mean, Tom Kench in the solo lane, he is a pretty safe pick. He has that armor and he has a lot of health and tankiness. He might be kind of a slower champion, but that's kind
hmm
of like how you can get a supportive element from a solo lane. So that's kind of like
yeah.
what he's good for.
I see what you're saying. But then I don't know. It comes back to the same thing. He has like one supportive ability on a long cooldown, and so all the time that ability is not up, then he feels useless and like a pointless champion. Which is
I mean, I kind of disagree, but
maybe, yeah. I guess maybe his knockup is a little faster than I'm giving it credit for. But to me, I don't know. It seems so slow. All of
yeah.
his CC and like if you're a player with hands, you should be able to.
I mean, comparatively, another like combination that I was thinking about this weekend, like I think Tom Kench, like with all these skirmish champions in the middle of this big team fight, can have some worth where he slows down
Yeah.
enemy champions, maybe saves a champion. But then when you
hmm
have like a Viego, Gwen, LeBlanc type of composition where like you can't save everyone, one of these guys is going to get through and kill your AD carry.
Yeah.
Um, I think almost like a better option right now is kind of into like a similar option is kind of like Volley Bear. I've been seeing a lot of Volley Bear this weekend, and I think he's an S tier jungler right now. He has a really good early game. His flash stun is very easy to execute. Those tower dives when he's level 6, he can turn off the turret for a few abilities, for a few seconds. And I think him in combination with another like dunk bro such as like Set is pretty cool, where Set can kind of ultimate and Volibear can ultimate on top. And then even when you get in these team fights where everyone's diving in to your ADC, you can get some like CC from the Volibear and still like counter their backline too. So I like that combination. Um,
Yeah, Volibear has been really impressive to me. It's just so I like the new Divine Sunder build a lot more than previously. You used to go like full tank Volibear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the Divine Sunder a lot more. It seems like characters that are threats, that can like even output a little bit of their own damage, are a little more popular in the meta right now. Or maybe it's just the strength of those items like Divine Sunder. But I feel like with this more self sufficient build, where you can sometimes even duel like, I don't know who I'm thinking, a mid laner or something in the right circumstances, it makes Volibear feel a lot better to me, and he can actually be a pretty significant damage threat, like all the way to level 11, 12.
I think
Um,
one cool like composition that could work with Volibear and a Tahm Kench would be
mhm,
the other week we saw Golden Guardians play Tahm Kench in the mid lane as kind of a counter to the Kali mid plus Ziggs bot lane, so they didn't have the DPS to puncture through. And then it was
mhm.
paired with the Sivir Yumi to speed up the Tahm Kench and keep it fast. I think if you can get those three champions in the right like order, and then you also add like a Volibear into the jungle, and then in the top lane you can maybe even have like something really cool like a Darius, where like you have Tahm Kench kind of flying in, and then you have another Dunk Bro with the Volibear, and then you have the Darius dunking in, and then Sivir speeding everyone up. That's one thing that could be cool because our best friend, what's his face? Who was Team Soul Mid's top laner? Oh, Broken Blade.
Uni.
Actually,
Uh,
Broken Blade. He had really good success with Darius last playoffs and actually won a few series with it. And it even got banned out. Another cool pick that we saw in the LPL was Shaco. JDG
mhm.
played it. Our best friend Dom was casting that game.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, it
That's
looked
funny.
really good. One of the things with Shaco is um, when you're starting like on the top side, on the top right, if you're on that team, I forget if it's red
Yeah,
side or blue side.
I think it's red.
So
Yeah.
Shaco usually puts a box like in the entrance next to the Wraiths at 34 seconds. So that means he can get two boxes onto Wraiths and one
Hmm.
box onto red. So naturally, what you want to do is you want to kind of invade Shaco in the early game and mess up his boxes, and that puts him really far behind.
Hmm.
But that box that you place at 34 seconds, if your team's prepared in the same area that the enemy invades from, then it can that's kind of how you turn that level one around. In this
Mm.
specific game, the other team messed up because first of all, you shouldn't even go through that like mid lane area to the Wraith's jungle camp. You want to go like the long way because Shaco will always put the box in the high, like the highest probability area that you'll invade from. So you want to
Yeah.
go from a different direction. But they also won the team fight even without the box procking, which was really surprising. But that was a cool game to watch too.
Yeah. Speaking of LPL and like sort of a little bit about Volibear indirectly, I was watching. I think it was IG versus Top Esports, and I just saw it in like my YouTube recommendations. I was like, oh, these are two famous teams. Let me see how it's looking. And I saw, so they picked one of the teams picked Rise, and they had a really cool strategy where they had Xin Zhao, but this would work with like any diver or engaged champ. And
Mhm.
Rise was ulting, and only the Xin Zhao would get in the ult, and it would deliver him right to the back line as like they engaged on the front line. And it was a really cool look. So like imagine you engage on the front line with your Nautilus or Leona or something at the same time as your Rise ulting Volibear into the back line, and he comes in and
Hmm.
I don't know. Sounds like
I
a cool combo.
One of those things with Rise now that it's becoming kind of more meta is that his
Hmm.
ability to get off his ultimate is kind of hard. Like it's like the applications ultimate. There's a lot of it, but it's kind of like Bard ultimate where it's difficult to know when to use it and when not to use it.
For
And the
sure.
best Rises are able to have some really good ultimates. I think Power Vivo had some really good Rise ultimates. Jizuke normally has some really good Rise ultimates. And I think that's
Hmm.
kind of what makes or breaks the champ most
Yeah.
times when we see mid laners pilot it.
Yeah. It's exciting to see those like 5-man Rise ults right into the Baron pit so that they don't have vision of you going and rush it down. Good stuff.
Mhm. Another champion that's pretty popular right now is LeBlanc. I was watching Midbeast, his YouTube channel, a few weeks ago, and he was talking about Malzahar, which is kind of showing up a little bit in the LPL as well in solo queue because it has a really good matchup into LeBlanc. Because when you think about it, LeBlanc has early kill pressure onto a lot of mid laners. So a Malzahar with his spell shield, you negate some of that early poke, and then it's really easy to just kind of sit under your turret and then just push the wave with your Voidlings plus your deep damage over time ability that jumps from one minion to another. And then in the team fights, when you're starting to get active, it's really a late game champ, but in the mid game, as long as the LeBlanc doesn't get fed in, skirmishes and from roaming around early game, in the mid game, you can just ult the LeBlanc, and then, it's really easy to kill her if you have a Volibear and other champions coming on top. And then in the late game, you actually deal a lot of damage once you have like your Leandri's Anguish plus your Demonic Embrace, your Rylai's Crystal Scepter. You can actually get a lot of AoE damage and slow over time. So that's one cool pick that we saw this weekend. FlyQuest pulled it out.
That silence can be clutch too for sort of stifling plays. If enemy team engages on you, you drop that down on them, all of a sudden they're sitting there dead in the water for a few seconds, and so you can unload your good juice on them. Good juice. Wait a minute. Yeah. Anyway, we just have like one more week of LCS, right, before playoffs?
Yeah, I believe so.
It's exciting stuff. I've really been impressed with Lucian too, while we're on the topic of interesting picks. Well, it's not that interesting anymore. It's sort of been dominating, but it really seems like in this meta where tanks aren't so prevalent, Lucian is like the ultimate mid laner, kind of. He has great wave clear. He has really good sustained damage on champions. His mobility is incredible. You're like never catching this guy in a team fight with Gale Force and his dash cooldown being lowered by his double shots. The culling, there have been so many clips I've seen this season of people just like culling people down 100-0. And yeah, exactly. And he seems to have like no bad matchups really. Even like LeBlanc, who you usually think of as like an aggressive, more early game matchup. You can see like all the way up to level 6 or 7 or around there. Lucian isn't squishy enough at that point that you can really delete him. Then he can still really fight back in that lane. And I'm just expecting to see a lot of it coming into playoffs.
I think previously when I saw a lot of Lucian in the mid lane, one of his issues was if he died early game, then maybe like you're saying, these tanks and then these mid lane mages would kind of keep him under as the game progressed. But now it seems like even if he's kind of behind, that he can have these really big cullings that just burst out an 80 carry or one of these like kind of off tank bruisers in the middle of a team fight. Go on.
I was wondering if you could attribute that to the fact that now he builds the Cyrilda's Grudge item, which has like that armor pen on it that makes your abilities, hit harder more so than like crit or AD really would. And so maybe that can be a little bit of the reason why his cullings seem to be hitting a little harder.
That definitely helps. I think that was actually a good item that they added, like in the one of the after that whole item rework. I'm pretty happy they added that as one of the items, because we kind of see that as one of the niche options with champions like Lucian or Ezreal or some of these poke 80 carries. It's definitely a decision that you're going to make in the middle of a game, whether you want that or the other option. The other option gives you crit, which is really important, and extra damage to tanks. But sometimes the slow is more valuable because you're getting off like 3 or 4 more of these culling attacks onto an enemy that can really make or break a team fight.
Yeah, true. A couple more mystic shots onto the enemy. Yeah.
Trying to think what else I have. I mean, honestly, I think EG and TSM look like the strongest teams in my opinion, closely followed by 100 Thieves, but I could see them collapse in playoffs easily. And then TL and C9, like I was saying earlier, one of the consequences of having internal problems is you might just randomly get tilted out of your mind in the middle of like one of these first round series. So I think it's going to be and then we have the Dark Horse Immortals come again. I think it's going to be exciting playoffs. How do you feel about it?
I'm in the same boat. We kind of started spinning that narrative the other week of like, or even they said it. I heard them say it on the desk. Like usually, this is kind of like the doldrum time of the split. Like the past 2-3 weeks, like you're kind of coming up near the end, but you still have like 3 or 4 weeks left, where it can get to be like sort of a slog to be following LCS, and you'll be watching like okay, well, like the ninth place team versus 10th place team, this is really interesting. But like we were saying, the sort of late bloom of these lower tier teams and the it's the opposite of blooming and
There's
fading,
a
I guess.
word.
Yeah, I don't know, fading of the upper tier teams, making them like kind of
I'm gonna look it
more
up.
go for it, yeah, sort of more comparable has made things really interesting. Um, oh, there's something I want to say after this. What do you got?
Blooming antonyms. What the heck? This is like sallowish, doughy, livid.
Doughy,
I don't think this website's all that
nice.
reliable.
So a lot of people are like pretty high on 100 Thieves, right? Or like
Mm-hmm.
decently high. But I was watching Abadage. He was in an interview with Thorn and I Will Dominate the past week, and he was saying some things that were like they didn't make him look too good, or like they made him look a little concerning. He was
Like
talking about
what?
how his past some of his past performances in Europe where just like he was just really lazy and he just wanted to be playing because he could get paid to play video games, and then in the summer or his off
Oh
season
wow.
he would go and be able to hang out with his friends and stuff, and it was a little awkward because you could see Dom and Thorn being kind of like but it makes me a little bit concerned about
I mean, did he
Abadage.
say like this time's different at least, or he was just
Not really. I
he was
maybe, but it
oh boy.
was a little concerning.
I
I
don't
just
even
thought
know
it
if I
was
want him to go to Worlds now
imagine
because it
that, yeah.
doesn't sound like he has that like hunger. Like
Yeah, and I don't know.
we've seen
Obviously,
that in
he's playing fine now, but
we've seen that in rookie players before, like Adrian, Stixay, kind of these younger guys. Even some of the casters, we used to have Zyrene. They don't take their job seriously enough. I mean, part of the whole esports aspect, it's a really big growing market and it's very competitive and people are taking it really seriously. But at the same time, it's still kind of in between that phase of like really competitive and video games are really fun. I think it'd be kind of sick to make a career out of this if I could. Like kind of like a pipe dream that ends up coming real is like kind of how a lot of like the older generation looks at video games right now. If you get to the NBA for basketball, 9 out of 10 times you're gonna have to be like grinding all the time. But with League of Legends, it does seem like it's not the same type of grind. Like there's a grind to get really good, but it's also like you can just play video games all day, which is a standard thing for a lot of kids, and you can get there. With NBA champions, you're like pushing your body to the limit. You're throwing up after workouts. You're not throwing up after a league game.
I mean, dude,
Hopefully.
some of the games I have, let me tell you, it feels like I feel a little nauseous afterwards. Seeing some of the plays
Oh
my
yeah,
team is going for.
when we played Clash last weekend, I was ready to throw a fit at myself.
Oh, that was golden. Yeah, Greg is a one trick Shaco, obviously, and in Clash you can see your opponent's most played champions, and Shaco is like the enemy's team's first ban. This madman took Ari mid. It was a
I was like,
disaster.
oh, what do I play? Cristiano's mic is off. Mason's mic is off. I don't want a jungle. I should have picked Ezreal. See, we should have game planned more. I should have had
Yeah.
like the I don't know. I could
So
have
we
played
lost the
Tom
first
Tench
game.
even. I could have played Tom
That's
top.
true. Tom mid, I could have gone jungle. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Tom into
Uh,
Kiana.
is
That
that
would
who
have
we
been
were?
like my
Oh,
third time
that would
ever
have been.
playing.
I think that would have been dirty though. That sounds like a good
Just rush
matchup.
Thornmail.
Yeah.
They also had a Vayne
Um,
though, so I feel like Vayne is a pretty good pick into Tom Kench.
to tanks. Yeah. I don't think you're ever
Mm-hmm.
catching her.
Mm-hmm. So yeah,
So yeah. Do
how are
you
you
remember
feeling?
I'm feeling good. Where I think it was Alfari, or definitely was Alfari against Licorice, and it was Wukong against Gangplank at level 1. And Azael is saying, I'm really worried about this Gangplank. The matchup for Gangplank, here is really bad. And as he's like finishing saying the sentence, Alfari solo kills Licorice at level 1 in that same matchup. Just something a little funny. We'll call
Yeah.
back.
Something similar that I saw on Reddit was like I think it was Alfari playing Jace, and someone else was playing Gangplank, and he was saying, "Oh, I've seen this matchup a bunch of times in the LPL, and Jace always wins. It's terrible." And he was citing players that he's seen play, and no one in the LPL has played that matchup this split. That's kind of funny as well.
Yeah, I guess. Wait a minute. So if I'm striking down, I forgot about this. If I'm striking down TSM as my second strongest team, it's only fair if I raise my own contender, right?
Yeah. So how do you kind of rate the top 5-6 teams?
Yeah. So I think Evil Geniuses right now is the best team, which I think is a pretty popular, almost bandwagon opinion right now. But I'm happy to hop on that bandwagon. But team number 2. I think TL has fallen way too far out of favor to be considered for the position. And I think it's basically between Cloud9 and 100 Thieves. And I am more inclined to give to 100 Thieves right now, I would say.
You think 100 Thieves and like Cloud9 would both beat TSM in series? Because I don't.
You don't? I think so.
I think TSM is one of the teams I'd want to face the least. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, Evil Geniuses, like last split, like they didn't look that great, but coming into playoffs, they looked much better. And now that they look really good, I'm a little scared for anyone that's playing against them once they get into playoffs, because they could look even better.
Yeah, that TSM 100 Thieves matchup, I really see sort of breaking down in the bot lane. I think for the most part, the rest of the players are pretty comparable, or like not comparable in any way other than like.
We get
it. Ignore what I just said.
We get what you're saying.
Yeah. So like, sorry, yeah. But Lost and Sword Art, I think, are sort of a cut below your FBI's Hookies. Sword Art and Hookie are pretty close, but okay, you caught me. I'm just actually hating on Lost for being.
I mean, that's the thing. I think their laning phase has been one of their strongest lanes this split. So I don't necessarily think you can equate. I don't think you can say that FBI and Hookie will run them over for 3 games in a row. Maybe 1 game in the series, I could see it going heavily that side, but I could see just as easily 1 game going in the direction of TSM. My opinion.
I'm so interested to see when the next time they play is, because this is. I feel fairly strongly that TSM is not looking good.
What's also interesting is if they were to match up in the playoffs, it would be Reaper's first time facing off against Bjergsen as coach, which is
that would be a dank matchup.
It's kind of interesting to consider.
Greg, you'll never guess what tomorrow the first game is.
Is it TSM versus 100 Thieves?
That's exactly what it is, my friend. So that's the game to check out, to be looking out for this weekend, I would say. See which one of these double buffs is the buffest of the double individuals.
I mean...
Shit.
Come
on, man. You don't have to do me like that. But any other interesting matchups coming up? EG Cloud9, so worth tuning in for. Liquid EG, I'd say also worth tuning in for. And the final, EG 100 Thieves. We got lots of good matchups this weekend, actually.
Amazing. I mean, I don't have anything else, to be honest. I'm kind of out of words.
Yeah, I've been bled dry of words.
All right, well, this has been episode 15 of DoubleBuffs.
See ya, homies. Double Buff homies.
See you next week.
LCS homies.